Hello everybody and welcome to the War Room. This one is for the UFC London Main Event. Tom Aspinall taking on Alexander Volkov. So first of all, we've got to say that this is a big opportunity for Tom. It's a main event, UFC London. It's always a special moment, a special opportunity for a British fighter. I mean, you've got to think some of the fights that we've had. Bisping Silva is the one that stands out to me. This could be a real big moment for Tom Aspinall in his career. He's 11th in the heavyweight rankings currently, and he's fighting Alexander Volkov, who's 6th. And there are a lot of other things a lot of other odds that are stacked against Tom in this fight. I'll list out a few here. So first of all, tail of the tape, 34-9 for Alexander Volkov, so a massive amount of experience compared to Tom, who is 11-2. A lot longer average fight time for Volkov as well, which I think is significant in this because not only has he had a lot of fights, a lot of his fights go deep into the round. He's had some 5-rounders, he's had some experience in those later rounds, which I think is going to also play into this fight if it does obviously go past the first. So 15-15 is the average fight time for Volkov, whereas Tom is, not even at 3 minutes. A 2-inch height advantage and a 2-inch reach advantage for Volkov. And this is one thing that I think is interesting to address because although Volkov to us, regular humans looks massive, and he looks huge, he's a giant human being. From Tom Aspinall's perspective, he's not that much bigger. 2 inches in height, a couple of inches in reach. It made no difference when Volkov fought Stefan Struve that he had a height and reach disadvantage, and he still fought like the taller guy. The good thing about Volkov is that he fights like a tall guy, and sometimes tall individuals don't develop good jabs and good front kicks and teeps and good long-range weapons. They tend to get kind of tangled up very quickly, and the vulnerability of taller guys is, as we've seen Mark Hunt and Roy Nelson do to a bunch of them, you back them up against the fence and you club them over the top with the right hand, and then the height actually starts to work to a disadvantage. With Volkov being able to fight so well as a tall individual, those couple of inches in height and reach do make a difference to a lot of fighters. He was able to keep Walt Harris on the outside and really poke and prod at him and work his midsection. That's something that Tom has to get around in this fight, because even though, height and reach won't seem massive from Tom's perspective, they could seem prevalent in the fight because Volkov's so good at utilizing those attributes. The strike output, the strikes landed per minute, of course, is in favour of Tom, but then, of course, you've got to couple that with his average fight time being considerably shorter, and think he gets his work done with short flurries of bang, 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 and the guy's done. So, again, Volkov is very, very good at pacing himself out over 15 or 25 minutes and just kind of wearing and eroding his opponent down, beating them up to the body, beating them up to the legs, keeping them right on the end of that jab. And then if they do start to close distance, he does change his ranges to hooks and uppercuts as well. Got, good knees as well. But, the thing with Volkov is he sets a pace that's quite steady and consistent. And if you get stuck in that pace, much like most of his opponents do, we saw Derek Lewis caught in it for a couple of rounds until he was able to put his foot on the gas and change the speed of the fight and was able to land something explosive. That is definitely something that Tom can do. There's no doubt about it. He's very quick. He's got very, very heavy hands. I mean, if you look at his fight against Andrei Arlovski as an example, there were moments in that first round where Tom had caught Arlovski with a good shot and had backed him up against the fence, and Aspinall was throwing like 5 punches for every one that Arlovski threw back. Like, Arlovski fights at a regular heavyweight pace. He's actually quite quick for a heavyweight, but Tom made him look incredibly slow. And I think he's going to do the same thing to Volkov. So the trap for Tom would be getting caught in that kind of pick and poke and, play at range game. And keep a consistent pace all the way through, because that's where Volkov does good work. He's going to chop at the lead leg, which, Tom did struggle with a little bit against Arlovski. And the other question as well is, what does Tom look like, past 2 rounds? I mean, we saw him coming up through Cage Warriors, and he just runs through guys, even to the point where he's disappointed when the fight's over. The one that stands out to me is Cage Warriors 101 against Sofian Bukchu. He blocked a low kick, what was it, a minute 21 into the fight. and broke his leg. And that, obviously he was concerned for his opponent, but then there was this overwhelming feeling of disappointment, like, oh, another first rounder. He wants to be tested a bit. And you look through his record, and it wasn't until he got to Andrei Arlovski that he was really pushed into the second round. He has got a second round heel hook loss really early in his career, 2015. Which is, of course, is a gap in his game. I'm sure that he's tightened. His only other loss, which was a second round one as well, which was an illegal elbow. So that was Tom, not quite throwing the elbow at the right direction. It's a silly rule. John Jones has one loss on his record. Is the same kind of situation. But all of Tom's fights are first round finishes, like a minute 24. 45 seconds. He is a wrecking ball in the first round. He almost had Arlovski out of there at around the same time. It's around minute 45 in. He has to be very careful in this one because this is 5 rounds, and Volkov is very experienced over 5 rounds. He will play a steady pace. He'll keep working that jab into the midsection, which then starts to break the posture of his opponents. They start to try and move it with their hands, and that opens them up for the following shots. He's a very experienced fighter, is Volkov. He's not really going to want to fight off his back too much. Of course, with the amount of experience and years that he's been doing it, he does have a good grappling game, but it's just not something we see him use a great deal. I think he's maybe got two submissions on his record. I'll have a quick look for you right now. So, this might be a circumstance where Tom wants to nullify the height and reach advantage by putting him on his back. 3 wins by submission, I'm sorry. I think Tom is smart enough. I think he's wily enough. So even if it hits the floor, he's gonna feel very heavy and very imposing on Volkov, but he's also going to feel very difficult to control. This is the advantage of speed on the feet. It transfers to the ground as well. Tom's scrambles are going to be very quick. He's going to be very fluid in those transitions. He's got Mike Grundy there pushing him all the time and forcing him to work faster and work quicker. His natural advantage is being faster than these guys, and I think that applies to every range of the game against Volkov. Again, like I said, the danger is getting caught in that kind of sedentary pace where he's on the end of the foot and the jab of Volkov all night, and he can't seem to break through that barrier. He can't seem to force his way inside and make Volkov reactive to power. It's a big opportunity, but it's also a big ask, and this is where we're really going to see, where Tom Aspinall is at in his career and what he's ready for, because it's still very, very early for him. He's had 13 fights, and if you stack all of that time up, it comes to less than one of Volkov's fights. You're talking minutes of experience, whereas Volkov has recently come off that unanimous decision loss to Cyril Gane, which was a 25-minute fight. He lost to Curtis Blades over 25 minutes. So, his odds aren't great when it goes into deeper rounds, but the one time recently where he's won a fight in the championship rounds was actually in London when he headlined against Verdum. So you've got to think, not only has Volkov been in several 5-round fights, he's also fought at UFC London in the main event, and he stopped another former champion in Fabricio Verdum. He's going to feel very confident coming in here that he's going to be able to shut Tom down. It's going to have to be Tom that breaks the pace of the fight and the range of the fight and close him down and manage that energy. Because what I wouldn't like to see is Tom get really excited and hyped up by the crowd in the first round. He catches Volkov and he kind of gets rocked and he looks like he's out, and then Tom goes chasing after him and expends all of his energy and has that adrenaline dump, and then he's done for the rest of the fight, because you in there against Volkov, he'll slowly find a way to shut you down. Tom needs to play this one like a seasoned professional, and that's a big ask for someone that's only had 13 fights. But he's got that fight-ending power. He's got that fight-changing power. He's got that speed on his side. And I do think, in the clinch and on the ground, I do think he's going to be able to nullify what Volkov does. So that might be a safer route. Put him up against the fence where he's cramped, sit in half guard and tie one of his legs up and just keep, beating him down with elbows and hammer fists. That I could see him definitely getting a stoppage, cutting Volkov and doing some damage there. But I also think he can change that pace on the feet and get that big overhand to land. You know, one thing I also did really like was his finish against Spivak, where he was in a clinch and he went knee to elbow. Again, you know, 2 inches in height is not that much of a difference. If you're working tie clinch with someone that's taller and you're able to break that posture down, those short elbows can be fight changing as well. So, you know, it works well for Tom if he's closer in on this fight, and it works well if he's picking his angles and rushing his opponent and trying to stifle him with speed. It's a great fight. It's a big ask, and you know, I will be looking forward to seeing Tom put his best performance on. But there is no joke in Alexander Volkov. This is going to be a real interesting test for him, a real tough one. I'm excited for it. Make sure you check it out. See you next time.